The credit monitoring alert hit my phone at 2:47 a.m., and I knew my life was about to implode. I'm Technical Sergeant Desmond Forrester, 32 years old, Air Force, currently stationed at Fort Bliss, Texas on my third. Been overseas for 8 months now, counting down the days until I could get back to what I thought was my normal life. The alert was simple enough. New vehicle registration under my social security number. Problem was, I hadn't bought a car in 3 years. I stared at the notification on my iPhone, the blue glow cutting through the darkness of my barracks room. My bunkmate Rodriguez was snoring like a freight train 2 feet away. The alert showed a 2023 Ford F-150 registered in Dallas County, $47,000, financed through my credit union account. I opened the banking app with shaking fingers. Sure enough, there it was, a loan approval dated 6 days ago. Monthly payments of $812 automatically deducted from my checking account. The same account that held my pay, my savings, everything I had worked for over the past decade. The paperwork looked legitimate. My signature was there, or something close enough to fool a computer system. The address listed was 4821 Maple Grove Drive, Richardson, Texas. I'd never lived there, never even been to Richardson. I scrolled through the loan documents, each page making my stomach sink deeper. Employment verification from Fort Bliss. Accurate. Income statements. Accurate. Credit score. Mine. But the phone number listed wasn't mine. The emergency contact wasn't mine either. It was my ex-wife's new husband, Marcus Kellerman. I had met Marcus exactly twice. Once at the divorce mediation, where he sat in the hallway like some kind of moral support. Second time was when I picked up my last box of belongings from the house I'd paid for. He seemed decent enough then. Quiet guy, worked in IT, treated my ex-wife better than I probably had. I'd actually been grateful someone was taking care of her. Now, his name was listed as my emergency contact on a truck loan I never applied for. I pulled up my credit report on the app. 3 new inquiries in the past month, all from dealerships in the Dallas area. All approved. All using my information, but not my actual contact details. Someone had been busy while I was deployed, and they knew exactly what they were doing. My hands were steady. Military training kicks in when your world starts falling apart. But my mind was racing through possibilities. Identity theft was common enough, but this felt personal. Too personal. The emergency contact wasn't random. The timing wasn't coincidental. I checked my email next. Nothing from the dealership. Nothing from my credit union. Whoever did this had rerouted all the communications to different addresses. They'd essentially created a parallel version of my financial life. One where I bought expensive trucks and lived in Richardson, Texas. The worst part was how clean it looked. Professional. Like someone who understood both the military pay system and civilian credit processes. Someone who knew I'd be overseas for months, unable to physically verify anything or show up at a dealership to dispute the paperwork. I started taking screenshots of everything. The loan documents, the credit inquiries, the registration paperwork. Because this wasn't just identity theft anymore. This was something much more calculated. My phone buzzed again. Another alert. This time it was a motorcycle. The motorcycle alert showed a 2023 Harley-Davidson Street Glide, $43,000. Financed through the same credit union I'd used for my actual car loan 3 years ago. Same emergency contact. Same fake address in Richardson. I called Sergeant Rodriguez immediately. He was the only person in my unit who understood financial crimes, having dealt with his own identity theft issues 2 years back. Plus, he was awake. Rodriguez never slept before midnight. "Forrester, you sound like someone died," he said when he picked up. "Worse, someone's living as me." I explained the truck, the motorcycle, the credit inquiries. Rodriguez listened without interrupting, which meant he was taking notes. "How much total?" he asked. $87,000 so far. That's just what I've found in the last hour." Jesus. You think it's random? Emergency contact is my ex-wife's new husband. Long pause. That's not random? No, it's not. Rodriguez had me walk through the timeline. My divorce finalized 8 months ago. I deployed to Afghanistan 6 months ago. The first credit inquiry happened 4 months ago, right after my ex-wife and Marcus got married. They'd had access to my personal information during the divorce proceedings. Social security number, military ID, previous addresses, employment history. Everything someone would need to convincingly impersonate me to a loan officer. "You still have that paperwork from the divorce?" Rodriguez asked. "All of it. Digital copies on my laptop." "Good. Start documenting everything. Screenshots, timestamps, account numbers. We're going to need a paper trail that shows exactly when this started and how they got your information. I spent the next 3 hours building a case file. The pattern became clearer with each discovery. The first loan application happened 2 weeks after their wedding. Small amount. A personal loan for $8,000. Test run. When that went through without any flags, they got bolder. The truck loan came next. Then a credit card with a $15,000 limit. Then the motorcycle. Each application used slightly different contact information, but always with Marcus as the emergency contact. Always with addresses in the Dallas area, close enough to where they actually lived that they could handle any in-person requirements. The most damaging part was how they'd manipulated my military status. The loan applications listed me as active duty, which qualified for better interest rates and easier approval processes. They'd used my service as a selling point while I was overseas, unable to verify or dispute anything. By 03:00 hours, I had a complete picture. Marcus Kellerman had stolen my identity and used it to finance a lifestyle I couldn't afford, even if I wanted to. The total debt in my name was approaching 6 figures, and none of it was actually mine. I called my credit union's fraud hotline. The representative was helpful, but limited in what she could do at 3 in the morning. She placed fraud alerts on my accounts and started the dispute process for the unauthorized loans. But the real work would have to wait until business hours. The good news is you caught it relatively early, she said. The bad news is this looks sophisticated. Professional. You're going to need law enforcement involved. That's when I called Detective Sarah Young with the Federal Air Marshal Service. Rodriguez had worked with her before on a case involving fraudulent military benefits. She specialized in financial crimes that crossed state lines or involved federal employees. Technical Sergeant Forrester, she said when I explained the situation. I remember your name from Rodriguez's case file. You helped us track down some missing documentation. This is different. This is personal. Walk me through it. I gave her the condensed version. The loans, the timeline, the connection to my ex-wife's husband. Detective Young asked pointed questions about the divorce proceedings, what information Marcus would have had access to, and whether there were any other family members involved. The emergency contact detail is what makes this federal, she said. Using someone else's identity to obtain credit across state lines while impersonating military personnel. That's multiple felonies. We'll need to coordinate with local law enforcement in Texas, but I can start the federal paperwork from here. What do you need from me? Everything you've documented so far. And I need you to not contact Marcus or your ex-wife directly. No phone calls, no emails, no social media messages. If they know you're onto them, they might try to cover their tracks or create more damage before we can stop them. That was the hardest part. Sitting on this information while someone was actively destroying my financial life. But Detective Young was right. Confronting them too early would just give them time to prepare excuses or destroy. Instead, I spent the rest of the night monitoring my credit reports and bank accounts. 2 more alerts came in before sunrise. A furniture store credit account, and a loan for a boat. Marcus wasn't slowing down. If anything, he was accelerating. The boat loan was the breaking point. $68,000 for a fishing boat I'd never seen, financed through a dealership in Lake Worth, Texas. The loan officer had called the emergency contact number to verify employment details. Marcus had answered, confirmed my military service, and provided salary information that was accurate enough to pass verification. He'd been studying me, learning my financial patterns, my military benefits, my schedule. This wasn't opportunistic identity theft. This was a calculated, long-term plan to use my credit and military status for his benefit while I was overseas and unable to interfere. By 06:00 hours, the total fraudulent debt in my name had reached $137,000. Detective Young called at 08:00 hours with an update that made my blood run cold. We've identified 17 separate fraudulent accounts opened in your name over the past 8 months, she said. The total exposure is now approaching $200,000. But here's what's interesting. Marcus made a mistake yesterday. The boat loan application had triggered an automatic verification call to Fort Bliss personnel office. Marcus had answered my emergency contact number, but the loan officer had also called the base directly to confirm my status. The timing discrepancy was impossible to explain away. He claimed to be calling from your apartment in El Paso when the base confirmed you were currently deployed overseas. That's when the loan officer flagged it as suspicious and reported it to us. Detective Young had coordinated with ATF's Financial Crimes Unit. Agent Rodriguez was flying in from Dallas to handle the federal aspects of the case. The plan was simple, but required precise timing. "We're going to set up a controlled meeting," Detective Young explained. "Marcus has been using a mail forwarding service to intercept documents sent to your address. We'll send a fake insurance settlement check that requires in-person verification. When he shows up to claim it, we'll have him." The insurance settlement was for $12,000, supposedly from a military vehicle accident during May. The letter looked official enough to fool someone already comfortable with fraud. It requested that Marcus, as my designated representative, appear at a specific office in Arlington to verify identity and sign for the check. Agent Rodriguez arrived at Fort Bliss 2 days later, tall, methodical, with the kind of quiet intensity that made people nervous. He reviewed my documentation with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen every possible variation of identity theft. "Your ex-wife's involvement is what makes this case unusual," he said. "Most identity theft is random. This required inside knowledge of your military service, schedule, and personal financial information. She provided access, he provided execution." The sting operation was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. Marcus had confirmed his appointment through the mail forwarding service, believing he was collecting another fraudulent windfall. What he didn't know was that Agent Rodriguez and Detective Young would be waiting with recording equipment and arrest warrants. I watched the operation through a secure video feed from Fort Bliss. Marcus arrived at the Arlington office building at exactly 1,400 hours, carrying a folder of documents that included copies of my military ID, social security card, and orders. Documents that should have been impossible for him to obtain without help. The meeting room was equipped with hidden cameras and microphones. Agent Rodriguez posed as an insurance investigator while Detective Young observed from an adjacent room. Marcus entered confidently, clearly comfortable with the deception. "I'm here about the settlement for Technical Sergeant Forrester," Marcus said, sliding the folder across the table. "I'm his designated representative while he's deployed." "I see you have his military documentation," Agent Rodriguez replied. "How did you obtain these copies?" His ex-wife provided them. She's still listed as his emergency contact for some accounts, so she has access to his paperwork. That admission was exactly what they needed. Marcus had just confessed to conspiracy and explained how the fraud operation worked. But Agent Rodriguez wasn't finished. "This is quite a bit of documentation for a simple insurance claim. Have you handled other financial matters for Sergeant Forrester?" Marcus relaxed, apparently believing the question was routine verification. "Oh yeah, several things. Car loans, credit cards, even a boat loan last week. His credit is excellent, and with his military salary he qualifies for everything. It's been very helpful while he's overseas." The recording captured everything. Marcus describing the fraudulent accounts, explaining how he'd used my military status to qualify for loans, and admitting that my ex-wife had provided the initial documentation. He even mentioned specific dollar amounts and loan companies. Agent Rodriguez let him continue for another 10 minutes, gathering details about the mail forwarding scheme, the fake address changes, and the systematic way they'd targeted different types of credit. Marcus was proud of his work, describing it like a legitimate business operation. "One last question," Agent Rodriguez said. "Are you actually authorized to on Sergeant Forrester's behalf?" "Well, not officially," Marcus replied, "but he's deployed, and someone needs to handle these opportunities. He'll thank me when he gets back and sees how much I've improved his credit portfolio." That was when Detective Young entered the room with handcuffs. The arrest was anticlimactic. Marcus went from confident to confused to panicked in about 30 seconds. He kept insisting there had been a misunderstanding, that he was helping me, that everything was legitimate. The recording equipment captured every word. My ex-wife was arrested the same afternoon at her workplace in Dallas. She'd been more careful than Marcus, never directly applying for credit in my name, but the conspiracy charges were solid. Phone records showed dozens of calls between them, discussing my schedule and financial information. The federal charges were filed within a week. Identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy, and impersonation of military personnel. The total fraudulent debt had reached $218,000 by the time all accounts were identified and frozen. Agent Rodriguez walked me through the restitution process during a secure video call. The good news is that most of this debt will be discharged once the fraud is proven in court. The bad news is that cleaning up your credit reports will take months, even with federal documentation. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later, but Marcus and my ex-wife both accepted plea agreements rather than face federal court. Marcus received 4 years in federal prison and full restitution responsibility. My ex-wife received 2 years and joint liability for the financial damages. But the real victory came when Agent Rodriguez called with an unexpected update. "We've identified 12 other service members who were targeted by similar schemes," he said. "Your case broke open an entire network of military identity theft." Marcus wasn't working alone. He was part of a larger operation that specifically targeted deployed personnel. The investigation expanded to include victims from 3 different military bases. The fraud network had stolen over $1.2 million from active duty service members, using the same methods Marcus had used against me. Emergency contact manipulation, mail forwarding, and systematic credit exploitation. My documentation and testimony helped convict 6 additional defendants. The federal task force that grew out of my case eventually recovered funds for 43 military families who'd been victimized by similar schemes. 6 months after the arrests, I received a check for the full restitution amount. My credit reports were clean, my accounts were secure, and the mail forwarding service had been shut down by federal investigators. 12 months later, I was back at Fort Bliss with a new assignment and a clean slate. The financial nightmare was behind me, but the lessons stayed sharp. My new apartment was deliberately simple. 1 bedroom, basic furniture, and a security system that would make a bank vault jealous. I'd learned to trust technology more than people, at least when it came to protecting what mattered. The credit monitoring app still sent daily reports to my phone. Clean scores across all 3 bureaus. No suspicious activity. No mysterious accounts. The alerts had become routine background noise, like the sound of helicopters overhead during training exercises. Agent Rodriguez called occasionally with updates on the broader investigation. The federal task force had grown into a permanent unit focused on military identity theft. My case had become their training example for new investigators. "You should be proud," he told me during our last conversation. "Your documentation standards helped us build prosecution templates that we're using nationwide." I wasn't looking for pride, I was looking for prevention. The other victims from the expanded investigation had formed an informal support network. We shared security tips, credit monitoring strategies, and protection protocols. Most of us had never met in person, but we understood each other's paranoia in ways that civilian friends couldn't. I organize annual reunions for fraud survivors in my unit. We meet at a barbecue restaurant in El Paso every September, sharing war stories that have nothing to do with combat. The group grows every year as word spreads about our security methods and recovery experiences. Staff Sergeant Williams, one of the newer members, had been hit for $90,000 while deployed to Kuwait. His brother-in-law had used his military ID to secure business loans. The pattern was always the same: trust, access, exploitation. "The hardest part isn't the money," Williams said during our last meeting. "It's knowing that someone you trusted was planning this while you were getting shot at overseas." I understood that feeling completely. My current rotation was scheduled for next spring. This time, I had systems in place that would make fraud nearly impossible. Automated credit freezes, restricted mail forwarding, and financial power of attorney limited to my attorney only. No family members. No friends. No exceptions. The paranoia had become practical wisdom. My ex-wife had been released after serving 18 months. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved back to her hometown in Ohio. We had no contact, and I intended to keep it that way. Some bridges were meant to stay burned. Marcus was still serving his federal sentence at a minimum security facility in Colorado. His earliest parole date was 2 years away. I hoped he was learning useful skills for legitimate employment, but I wasn't holding my breath. The restitution payments arrived monthly like clockwork, automatically deposited into a separate account I designated for fraud recovery. The money felt tainted, so I donated most of it to military family support organizations. Better to help other people than to profit from my own victimization. Evening runs around the base had become my meditation time. The desert air was clean, the horizon was clear, and the silence felt earned after months of legal chaos and financial reconstruction. My phone buzzed with the daily credit report summary. All clear, all secure, all mine. It was finally over, and the silence felt earned.